Hello, welcome to another up close video. So today's one is looking at Tonic Stamp Club number 6. I cannot believe we're on number 6 already. And this one is called Compassion and Poppies. So you've got beautiful images of poppies that actually have coordinating dies that cut this one into 2 parts, so you don't have to just use it as one focal element. You've got individual poppies as well. You've also got cherry blossom flowers which coordinate with one of the dies, and then there's also these gorgeous leaves in here as well. And this set is really great for those difficult kind of cards, but there's also different sentiments, so you can make these into birthday cards as well, but you've got different kind of wordings to what you would usually see. I mean, usually you get sorry for your loss with sympathy and stuff, but there's a couple of different sort of ones in here that are a quite nice alternative to just the normal kind of sentiment. So I also think this will be great for end of the year time, kind of like, you know, around November for Remembrance Day kind of projects as well. This in an art journal page would be beautiful, this gorgeous large poppy design there as well. And as well as the A5 stamp set with a stamp club, you're also getting an A5 die set. And this month, you actually get a die to cut out every single stamp, bar the stalk, because you can bend that and then a die wouldn't match it, and the sentiments as well. But you're, as well as then getting all the dies to cut the images out, you're also getting a few extra dies too, with these kind of branchy sort of designs, which would be great for anything, especially like wintry cards, because they could just be a branch off a tree where all the leaves are fallen off. But they're actually to go with the cherry blossom style flowers that are in the stamp set as well, and they work really nicely for a sympathy card too. And then as well as those kind of extra dies, you've also got a set of 3 nesting rectangles, and the rectangles fit absolutely perfectly in proportion to an A2 American sized card. So they're 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and they'll fit perfectly that kind of dimension. So the border around the edge of your actual main card will be that, you know, be perfect all the way around. But if you do prefer to make A6 sized cards, it will just mean you'll have a slightly wider border on one of the short ends, which you could then just wrap a ribbon round to kind of disguise that it's slightly offset. Or if you're doing a portrait card, having a wider gap at the bottom isn't really too much of a weird design element as well. So they'll work really nicely on A2 and A6 cards, and then obviously you can mat and layer them up, or just use them as toppers on larger cards as well. So they're really nice proportioned rectangle, which is lovely, and they go in increments of, so the frame is maybe 3 millimeters wide when you cut 2 of them together, which is really a nice width actually. It's not too thin that you can't easily put some glue on the back of it to stick it down, which is really nice, because sometimes if you've got a really skinny frame, it's hard to know how to stick it down without all the glue oozing out from underneath it. So they're really lovely, these little frames, and I've shown I think I've used them on maybe 3 or 4 of my cards, but there are loads of different ways to use frames. And again, if you're using bigger cards, you could cut these kind of frames multiple times and stagger them going round, so you kind of get a pointy, scribbly almost looking kind of a frame as well. Or you just use them as the large rectangles as well, which is brilliant. So I will walk you through, I think I'll walk you through the stamp set first, and I'll show you what dies coordinate. I am missing one die, so I'm missing the die for this little flower here, but I've got everything else to show you, but just that one I'm missing. But let's have a look at the stamp set. So I'll look at all of the images first, and then I'll tell you what all the sentiments are. So this is the gorgeous poppy design. I've got one stamped out here. I don't know which size this is. This is this is kind of like an A6 size, so that is how large that poppy design looks on an A6 card, and then for an A2 card it's just a teeny bit skinnier widthways and a little bit shorter lengthways as well, so it fits the proportion really nicely, which is great. And if you wanted to fill more of this design, or if you wanted to do a DL card, or slimline kind of a card, so if you imagine the width to be about here, and then if we say the height is going to be about here for a DL card from down here to up here, so you can actually lengthen this design either by moving the design up and using the little stem or just a black pen to extend the stalks going downwards so they're longer, or you've actually got separate poppy heads. So if you masked off these poppies, you could then use the stem with these extra poppies to create a longer design as well, which would look really lovely too. So there's different ways of extending it. You could even maybe move this towards the top of the design, hide the join and add some more stems and a couple more flowers down there as well, and use like a sentiment to hide the join across the middle. So there's ways of making this work for larger cards too. And as I said, the die for this one, you actually have two dies, because if you can see the design, it's actually in two separate pieces. So you've got these three poppies together, and these ones aren't actually connected, these last two. So if you wanted to repeat this across, say like an 8x8 card, and you wanted a big poppy border going all the way across the bottom, you can stamp and cut these out multiple times and then mix them. So you could change the height of just this cluster of three and move this cluster up and use the stem to extend them, or you could just mix and match the order in which you have them as well, and maybe even trim off that last poppy there. The die doesn't trim that off, but you could easily snip around it and trim that off so that it nestles into each other differently, so that the border doesn't look like you've just repeat stamped the same stamp, which is really nice. And again, you can fill in, if you're doing a border like that, you can fill in with these individual flowers and the stalk as well, which is brilliant. So that is the kind of the main poppy design, and you've got 5 poppies in there, which is a really lovely number of poppies to have. Odd numbers always look better to the eye, and I tend to either go for 1, 3 or 5 flowers on a card, so having them already in that cluster of 5 is brilliant. And if you want to, you know, extend it, bulk it out a little bit, add some more poppies on, just adding a couple more poppies into that will really fill out that design as well. So you've got that gorgeous design, really do love that one. Then these two I really love as well. I really do love leaf stamps and dies. I don't know what it is about them. I feel like you can use leaves for any occasion really. You can make them look more Christmassy. They can be kind of tropical looking leaves. They can be autumn leaves in the different colours, or I think they do make really nice sympathy cards as well, having a leafy design. So you get these two beautiful ones, and they are the opposite of each other. One is smaller and one is larger. So you can really experiment with different ideas of layering them up on top of each other and different kind of techniques and stuff as well. Then, as I keep mentioning, you get the stalk here as well. So you can extend any of these or add a stalk to the individual flowers to extend the design. Then you also get cherry blossom flowers. You get 4 different cherry blossoms. So you've got this little one, this one here, that's the largest one, and then the smallest one is down here as well. And you get all the dies to cut them out, which is brilliant, because it saves so much time to be able to cut 4 flowers out in one go. And then the separate poppies that I keep talking about are these ones, and they are all different from the actual poppies in the main image as well. So these poppies are really lovely for decoupaging. I did decoupage up sort of like just parts of them rather than the whole flower, but in some cases, like with this one here, this poppy is larger than this poppy, so you could actually put that large poppy head over the top of that and decoupage up as well that way, rather than having to stamp out and mask your own stalks. You could put a slightly larger flower over the top of these, some of these, like this flower could go over the top of this one to give a little bit of a different look as well. So tons of different ways of making this stamp look different so that it doesn't look like you've just repeat stamped it. You can just use so many of the other elements to create a different kind of look. And then the final image sort of stamp is this one, which is beautiful. It's like it almost looks a bit like stylized poppies, and it's perfect for creating those kind of Remembrance Day cards with like the fields of poppies, or it just makes a lovely little border on a card, or because you get the coordinating die, you can actually make it into a shaker, which looks really cool as well, and I'll show you that on one of my cards. I also made this into a shaker, but I used the rectangle dies that you get, but you could also use the coordinating dies to make this into a shaker in a similar way to how I made this one into a shaker. So having the coordinating dies, I think I've said this in one of my other Stamp Club videos before, I never like whenever I've had a stamp set in the past, I've never bought the coordinating dies because I'm just like, oh, I won't make the use out of them and I can just fussy cut something out. But having the coordinating dies gives you so many more options that you can't really do with fussy cutting, or you can't do it easily, like creating apertures so that you can recess designs behind an aperture that fits it absolutely perfectly. So I really love experimenting with those kinds of cards. I did only do it for that one, the poppy border one that I made into a shaker, but there are loads of other ones within this set that you could do that with as well. Particularly the large poppies and the leaves would work really nicely for that kind of a technique. So those are all of the picture stamps, and then for the wordings, you've got some really lovely ones, some that can be combined together, which is really nice. So you've got thinking of you, and then you've got at this difficult time, so it could be thinking of you at this difficult time, or you've got warm birthday wishes at this difficult time, because obviously everybody goes through birthdays and sometimes they coincide with bad events. Keeping you in my heart at this difficult time as well. I'm so sorry for your loss, and you could add thinking of you onto the end of that. And then you've also got sending the biggest hug your way, which I thought was really lovely, this one. I really like that one. You could even, I have snipped this one up because I was sort of stacking them on top of each other, but you could even do sending the biggest birthday wishes your way, or the biggest birthday hug your way as well, and mix and match that way to create a few more birthday sentiments out of this set as well. So, or you can obviously combine it with other sentiment dies, word dies, letter stamps, any other sentiment stamps that you have from previous stamp clubs or just in your stash. And also, I mean, last stamp club, I think that one did sell out, the background one, but some of those large word dies from that would work really nicely with these poppies. I was very tempted to pull them out and use them with these, but I knew it had sold out, so it wouldn't really be fair to show you some cards if you couldn't still get hold of the stamp and die set. So then we've also got the die set, and I'll show you which dies correspond. It is basically everything, except I'm missing one and there isn't any dies to cut out the sentiments. But if you bought the, what was it called, banners and something that came out with Stamp Club number 2, there was a set of dies that cut out different kind of banners. That would work really nicely for these, or just using your paper trimmer or a long bladed pair of scissors works really nicely. And actually even the deckled edge trimmer as well, if you got hold of that, I think it's still in stock, I'm not sure. But yeah, that would work really nicely for trimming out your sentiments as well. So let's show you all of the dies, and I'll show you in a second how easy it is to line up the dies with your stamped images as well. But basically you have that die that cuts out that cluster of 3. Then you also have this die. You have to do them separately, obviously, because the metal is going to overlap. But you also have this die to cut out that cluster of 2. Then you have the large leaf die, which perfectly cuts that one out. And these are actually really easy to stamp onto. So I've used a couple of these leaves on one of my cards, and I just already had them die cut, and I just stamped onto them, and it was really easy to do it that way as well. So whichever way you prefer, whether you prefer to die cut first and then stamp, or stamp first and then die cut, I suppose it depends if you're colouring it really. If you're colouring it, it's kind of nicer to stamp it first, colour it, and then die cut it. But with like a solid stamp like these leaves, it doesn't really matter which way round you do it. So you've got one die to correspond with each of those. They do give a slight white border around all of the die cuts, so if you were using this as an actual branch, which it works perfectly as an actual branch, but it's just slightly more of a filled out kind of branch compared to the stamp, because it has that little white border in it as well, so it's a slightly chunkier kind of branch than what you see with the stamped image, but it works really nicely, and using that as a stencil looks really good, and I've done a card showing you that as well. Then you also get the corresponding dies for all of the individual flowers. So you have all of the 3 extra poppies have got a coordinating die, and then you do have the 4 coordinating dies for the cherry blossom. I'm just missing this one, but you will get that in your set. So you've just got all of these little ones to perfectly cut all of them out, and it's really easy to line them up, as I'll show in a second. I said this in one of the earlier videos, that all of the dies were really easy to line up because you put the die on top and you can see the black edge around it. So they all do that in this this month's one, which is really good. You don't actually have to do the kind of template method to get them to cut perfectly. You can just cut them straight away and there's no guesswork involved. You can easily tell how they're going to cut out. So that is all of the ones that have the coordinating dies, and this one does as well. So it's literally just the stalk, because you can bend that into whatever kind of, I mean, you don't have to use it as a stalk. Obviously with a poppy they do have quite straight stalks, but you might want a drooping poppy, so you could curve the stalk downwards and have maybe this sort of side view one drooping off of it as well. Or you could actually just use this to create a really fine stripy pattern on a card, or even to create some ground. What did I say that in the other day? Oh, it was last month's one. Last month's Stamp Club video, I said you could take that small little border die and make it into like a mound of ground. And you could do the same thing with this little one as well. I think it would look really nice done like that too. So those are all of the coordinating dies. And then as you can see, the extra dies are 2 cherry blossom branches, but they could be turned into different things as well. Maybe even snowmen's arms for Christmas cards, or I'm thinking having like these coming in across the top of the card and then using real thread to attach like little baubles hanging down. I think that would look really lovely. Or for Easter cards actually, for like home decor and stuff, or actually they kind of look like forsythia. You could turn them into forsythia really easily. Or for Easter cards, you know, you can have like twigs in a vase and then hang Easter eggs and little chicks and stuff off of them. You could do some cool Easter card like that as well. So they'd work really nicely for that. And I love that you get 2 different kind of ones. So if you're using multiple twigs on a card, you can really make it look different. And actually, I hadn't thought, but why not have a poppy wreath? You could use these stalks or branches to create an actual 3-dimensional wreath. Obviously you'd have to cut quite a lot of them, but then you could have the poppies within that wreath as well for another kind of design, because you do get poppy wreaths around Remembrance Day, so that would be a cool way of creating that. Or even a basis of a wreath with the branches and then bringing in some of the stamped die cut leaves as well, and then some of the flowers too. So lots of different ideas for those. And then finally you have the rectangle dies. So you've got 3 that stack inside of each other, giving the same increment between them. So it's, yeah, I'd say it's about 3mm all the way around between the different sizes. So then it would be about a 6mm frame if you cut the smallest and the largest together. And I'll give you a measurement for them as well. So the largest one is roughly 4.5 inches by 3.25 inches. And then the smallest one is roughly 4 inches by 2.75 inches. So they're really nice kind of size. And even as well, this kind of a rectangle size is quite nice scored in half to make a little booklet that you could then use as a gift tag on a present as well. You could have lots of these, fold them all in half, and then use maybe like part of this design with the large poppy, or even the smaller design and bringing in like one of the individual poppies, and then obviously it would be on that side, wouldn't it, because you'd fold it in half and that would be the front. But you could do some cool like decorations for little gift tags as well with that. So those are all of the dies that you're getting in this month. You don't get them on the magnetic sheet, they come on a piece of acetate, but I had prototype ones, so I just put mine straight onto a magnetic sheet for now. So I also wanted to show how easy it is to line these up as well. So if we hold this up closely, you can see that holding the die over the top of the image, you can still see all of the stamped lines, and that's because the cutting edge of the die is very close to the inside edge of the metal, or almost exactly on the edge. So it means that when you're looking through the die, you'll still be able to see all of the stamped details. So if you make sure when you're lining your die up to cut it that you can see an even border, like a tiny little slither of white all the way around your image, and then you tape it down, you know that you're going to get it to cut out perfectly, which is really nice because you know that all of that effort and time you've spent colouring in your image, you're not going to then ruin it, because you know, sometimes you get solid dies, don't you, that have the metal over the whole thing, and then you can't really see how it's going to line up. Or sometimes they have, like, for example, maybe the leaves would have been a solid bit of metal and just the flowers would be open, and then sometimes you might have lined up one area perfectly but the other area slightly off and you don't realise. But with these ones, really easy to line them up, and even the smaller one as well, it's the same for them all. They're all just so easy to line up and get them perfectly die cut as well. So I'll be back in 1 second to show you all the samples that I've done. Okay, so I've got 10 samples to show you, and I tried to use them in traditional ways and kind of sort of non-traditional ways a little bit. I mean, you can use stamps in whatever way you want to, but I tried to show a range of different things that you could do with these stamps, or any other stamps that you have really. So I've split them into examples with cherry blossoms, and then I've got 3 examples just with the kind of leaves, and then I've got 5 examples with the poppies as well. So I'll go through the cherry blossom examples first. So this is like the traditional way that I always think of a cherry blossom, so I just had to recreate that. It is a little bit wonky. I don't know what was wrong with my eyes when I put that frame on there, but it's a tiny bit wonky. But anyway, I cut 4 of the branches, and then I used my brown Copics to colour them. You could have done it from brown card as well. I was just being lazy and just had white card handy. And I've just sort of arranged them so they kind of meet down in the bottom corner, and then you've got more length going up the middle with a little bit splaying out both sides. And then I've done loads of little flowers, so I think I stamped 5 of each flower, but I still had a few left over, I think, or maybe I used them all actually. Yes, I stamped 5 of each flower, and I used them all on this card, plus the 3 that I've used on this card as well. So they look so lovely when they're cut out with the coordinating die. I mean, I can actually show you both on this card because I didn't have the coordinating die for the largest flower, which is the one that's in the front there. So you can see cutting it out by hand versus cutting them out with the coordinating dies. It really does make a difference. They look more three-dimensional when you've used the dies actually, because they kind of bevel the edge. They just give a little bit more dimension. And an advantage of that beveled edge actually is because the card kind of comes downwards where it's beveled, if you put foam tape underneath there, or if you use like silicone gel, like glue gel, it wouldn't be as obvious because you've got that like 1 or 2 millimeter kind of dip coming down the edge, so you can kind of get away with not seeing the foam tape as much. Like if you, for example, this is the one I cut out by hand, and you can really see that foam pad underneath, whereas this little one here is cut out with the die and it's harder to see the foam underneath. I don't know if that makes any sense, I just thought of it, so I thought I'd mention that as well. But I mean, you get the coordinating dies with the Stamp Club, so there's not really much point in me showing you the difference, but I think it does really make a difference, and I think it looks really nice having that professional kind of edge to them. So that is the first card that I've done using the cherry blossoms. And I love the rectangles that you get as well. So you can see I've cut the smallest and the largest together to give a frame, and then I've cut the middle one and the largest together to give another frame that I've then stuck on top of the first frame. So you've got that 2 kind of levelled sort of frame, and you can do it either way around. You can do it by raising up the outside or the inside depending which 2 dies you cut together, and you can also cut an aperture into your card and then cut another aperture with a smaller die and place it behind to give a little border as well, and I'll show you that on another card that I've done too, because I think that's a lovely way of using them. And then for the background of this one, it was just a little bit of Distress Oxide and Tumbled Glass, using one of the lovely large Nouveau blending brushes to blend out that beautiful soft kind of background. and then I've just used the birthday wishes, and it actually says warm birthday wishes, but I cut the warm off and just used birthday wishes for this one, and I've matted it on a little piece of mirror card just to give it a little bit of shine on there as well, and then I've used a few Nouveau drops too. So that is like the traditional way of using the cherry blossom. And then this one is actually more of the poppies really, because I used all of these separate poppy images all over the background of this one, and then I clear heat embossed them. You could use white as well, I just had the clear out. And then look at that, it's really in your face. But the way I coloured the background is I got this matte, which is like the easy clean matte that comes with the Tim Holtz media matte, and I took some of the Frosted Petal Glacier Paste, which is this beautiful pale pink colour which came out in the Blue Blossom colour trend, and I just took my palette knife and scraped on a few little dollops of that, and then I sprayed that with water and sort of moved it around with my palette knife to kind of break up the larger areas. Then I took the Cherry Bomb Nouveau shimmer powder and sprinkled that onto the mat as well with the glacier paste, sprayed a little bit more water on to activate the powder, and then I literally just took the card and squished it into it. So I'd already heat embossed, and then I just squished this into it, and in some areas the glacier paste has kind of stuck over the top of the embossing. If you were really patient, you could get that off, you know, if you just scrubbed at that tiny little area with a baby wipe and then wiped it off with kitchen roll. But another way of doing this kind of technique is to then take this background, sandwich it between some printer paper, and then take an iron and iron off the embossing powder. Then you'd get a much more perfect look, because the whole image would come off again, and you'd have a really perfect white outline of the poppies in the background. So it's just multiple ways of doing this kind of technique, depending if you want it to be absolutely perfect or if you don't mind that it's sort of a little bit abstract. I quite like the look of it as it was, so that's why I left it. But then cherry blossom wise, the focal point on this, I did just originally just have the leaves, which are ones that I die cut first and then stamped on afterwards, and you can see how easy it is to get them perfectly lined up. All of them were the first attempt at stamping on them, so they're really, really easy to line up, which is brilliant. And then I've just used the remaining 3 large flowers onto that card as well, just to add a little bit extra. And again, oh, I didn't realise I'd done that, both of the ones that have got cherry blossoms on just say birthday wishes, but again I snipped off the warm and I just drew a flagtail banner on this one for this card. So 2 kind of different, very different looking ways of incorporating those cherry blossom stamps into your cards, so I thought I'd show you those. Then I've got 3 different ways that I've used the gorgeous leaves. I really love this leaf design. I don't know what it is about leaves, I just really like them. But this one, I was doing a technique. I did this for a magazine commission ages ago, like a few years back. And it's basically like a layered embossed resist. So the leaves that are white, I stamped them first. That is stamping with clear sticky embossing ink, putting on the clear embossing powder and heat embossing them. Then, once I'd heat embossed those, and it's just showing through the white of the card, so I could have used white embossing powder for those ones, but I just used the clear. Then I took a yellow Distress Oxide, which was mustard seed, and I inked the whole background with that. Waited for that to be completely dry. You can use a heat tool if you're careful of the heat embossing that you've already put there, or you can just wait like an hour or so and then use a lot of anti-static powder to make sure that there's no moisture left. Then the leaves that are appearing yellow, I stamped those next, so you're kind of protecting the yellow ink that you've just put down with the clear embossing powder. Then you heat set that. Then I came back in with a couple of orange Distress Oxides. I was using Spiced Marmalade and Crackling Campfire, again with the Nuvo large blending brushes. They work really, really nicely for your oxide inks to get a smooth blend. And so then that coloured the background orange, but it kept the first leaves white still and the second leaves yellow. Then instead of going for a third layer, because I was being too lazy for waiting for it to dry, I wanted to add that fourth colour back in. So I could have then heat embossed again onto the orange layer to protect the orange and then gone over the top with a darker colour. But instead, I decided to just take the leaves and go straight in with that crackling campfire, which is quite a deep orange colour, especially when you stamp with it. Ink blending it turns into a nice lighter kind of orange, but stamping directly with it gives you a darker tone. So I went in and did that. So I've then got 3 different tones of the leaves and then the orange background as well. I just really love that kind of look, and doing that cool technique as well, it just makes it a little bit different. I mean, I could have just stamped in yellow, a reddy orange colour, and then done just white heat embossing over the top, but I think it's quite nice to sort of layer your inks and preserve some of the colours by using clear embossing powder. It just makes you think a little bit differently about how you can build up the layers in a background. So that is the first one, using just the leaves. Then I'll show you this one, which again is with the leaves. I didn't realise I'd use birthday wishes so much, but all 4 of these cards that I've just shown you have birthday wishes on them. So I did use it quite a bit. I think that's all of the ones that say birthday wishes though. But this one is a similar background to the previous one, but it is just using stamping. And I was using my stamping platform because I wanted to get nice crisp results with 3 of the Nuvo hybrid ink pads. So I was using Pistachio Green, which is a really lovely pale green, Lime Burst, which was one of the original colours of the ink pads, and then Parakeet Green. Parakeet Green is from the Tropical Paradise colour trend set of inks. I think the pistachio one was in the Dream in Colour set of ink pads. I'm not sure, but they'll be linked below. But those are the 3 greens that I picked to do this card. And I just layered them up in a similar fashion really, but this time, instead of using heat embossing and preserving ink layers, we're just stamping with them to give a very similar sort of effect, which is really nice, so that you can do it in multiple different ways. And I really love those 3 greens together. I think they give a nice sort of dimension. Then in the background as well, I wanted to add something extra, so I took the Morning Moss Nouveau glitter marker. I sort of pounced it onto my mat to get a little puddle of it out, sprayed a bit of water in it, mixed it up, and then splattered it with a paintbrush over the background. And then I wanted to show a different kind of way of using the rectangle dies. So I took the smallest and then the medium-sized one, and I cut them both together. I did it first from the mirror card to get this one that I've inset into it, and then I also cut it straight from my background as well. And then when it came to putting them on the card, I could piece the outside portion of the background, the skinny green frame that I cut, and then the inside portion of the background, and then you get a continuous pattern going across, but it's all flat on one layer. Obviously you can just cut the skinny green frame and stick it on top, but sometimes it's nice to do something a little bit different and do a little bit of inlay die cutting like this. And you don't have to have the pattern continuous. I do like that continuous look, but you could have twisted it round the other way as well if you wanted to for a different look. You could have even made the centre section a shaker card as well. But yeah, again, I keep saying there's loads of different ways of using it, but there is loads of iterations of how you can change up any of these designs as well. And then I just added a few of those individual poppies onto this card too, because I think obviously red and green go really nicely together for Christmas, but just adding that pop of the red poppies really does like finish off the card. But you don't have to add the flowers. You can make it more of a masculine card and not have the flowers on there as well, and just have that gorgeous leafy background. And even actually the little critters that were in Stamp Club number 2, or any of the other floral elements that have been in the Stamp Clubs actually, would go really nicely with a background like this. So have a look through what you've already got and mix and match them. I think they'll be really nice together. So that is another way of using the leaves, similar to the first way, but simpler really, because you don't have the waiting for things to dry and the heat embossing and stuff. So this is just sort of stamping with them. And then this is actually in my sped up video too. There's 2 cards in the sped up video. This is one of them, and I'll show you the other one later. And then the other way that I was using the leaves, do I still have them here? Yes, I do. So I cut one of each leaf from some scrap white cardstock, and then I used them to ink blend over the background. So I was using Distress Oxides again, just because they blend nice and smoothly, and I was using Shabby Shutters, Twisted Citron and Pine Needles for the darkest colour, and just using them again, random kind of fashion, similar to stamping, but like I was saying before, they're a slightly chunkier kind of a leaf because they've got that white border sort of integrated into the design. You can see from an actual stamped one here to then the die cut one, they're much chunkier, but I like the look of them together, and you could even add them over the top as well, which would be really nice. So you could have ink blended them all in a lighter colour and stamped over in a darker colour, or vice versa as well, to give a completely different look. But the way I was doing it is just creating an overall background. So this was the other half of it. I actually did a full piece and then just used part of it for a card. But you can see how adding the heat embossing really changes it. And this one I was actually experimenting with some coloured pencils and just like drawing on a little bit of shadowing on there as well for something different, and then I can come back in and do the heat embossing on it again as well. But I love that heat embossing, and this is 2 of Tonic's glittery embossing powders. They are the Magical Woodland, which I think this one came out with the Woodland watercolour trend, and it is like a green powder but it's got gold glitter in it. And then this one is one of the newest ones, could have been the Tropical Paradise colour trend, but because I got them separately I can't 100% remember, but it could have been the Tropical Paradise. And this is the Glimmering Green, and again this one is a green embossing powder with the green glitter, but they go really nicely together as well as with the colours that I've used on here. And I think that Glimmering Green one goes really nicely with the pine needles. They're the perfect kind of tone to go together. And I love their glittery embossing powder. It really does just look like glitter, really, rather than an embossing powder. The way the particles kind of settle once you've heated it, it really does just look like you've stamped in glue and used glitter on there, which you can do as well. So, oh, and actually, yes, you could have, because these do look nice by themselves like this, instead of ink blending through a stencil, you could have cut them from funky foam and stamped with them as well. So then you could have stamped with the inks, or you could have stamped with any kind of Nouveau product that you can get into a paint-like consistency. You can stamp with that then as well, or you could have stamped and heat embossed as well with the larger blobbier image too. So loads and loads of different Nouveau products or different mediums that you can use with any aspect of these stamps. And I just really think that leaf stamps are so versatile, and you can do so many different things with them, and I just love that you can create such a beautiful background in no time at all. And then for this one I combined a couple of sentiments, so I've put sending the biggest hug your way at this difficult time, and I did actually snip this sending the biggest hug your way in half. And then I also snipped the at off this at this difficult time stamp, so that I could do this kind of stacked sentiment. So it's perfectly fine to snip into your stamps, because especially if you just cut them with one cut, you can match them back up again on an acrylic block. They'll just slot back together, which is really nice. And it's only just one tiny little cut across the little sentiment. So if you can and you don't mind doing it, I think it's quite nice to snip into them, just so you've got individual words as well, because there's quite a lot of nice different words in this month set that you could fit together with other words or dies that you have to complete a sentiment as well. For example, last month's one had the big hugs die. You could have stamped sending the biggest and then die cut hug your way as well, and even add the at this difficult time too, so you can really mix and match them. So that is the third one, using the leaves. Then I also have 5 different samples using the poppies. I'm really sorry if this video is really long, I've been talking for ages, but hopefully you're still interested in seeing some of these samples. So I have done the same card but in 3 different mediums, which I thought would be nice to kind of show as a comparison. So it's basically the same card, but I have missed out the background on this one. I've used stamping in the background on this one, and I've kind of put the sentiments in slightly different places. And this one I've also decoupaged. So this leaf coming forward, you might think, wow, her shading's really cool, it looks like it's really 3D, but it is actually 3D, so it's not that good a shading. And this leaf here is, or this petal, sorry, is actually 3D, and this one is, and part of this flower is, and this flower as well. I just really thought it would look nice adding the three-dimensional aspect, and I really like how that one turned out. So I've done 3 different mediums. I did the Nouveau watercolour pencils, which there are 5 sets of, and I actually did use at least 1 pencil out of each of the different sets because I was picking all the different red tones out and a few different blues and greens for the background and the leaves. Then this one was using the Nouveau Aqua Flows, which got quite dark, but I quite like that dark, deep red colour for the poppies. And then for this one I was using my Copics to colour this in as well, and having a lot of fun trying to get some sort of veining detail onto the poppies as well. I did spend the most time on this one, probably the least time on this one, and then the middle amount of time on this one, but I'm not that great with watercolour pencils, so this one it's not that great, but it gives you a comparison of like different ways to colour with them. And there was also something I wanted to show you for this one. So you can see I have stamped in the background thinking of you as just like a subtle kind of sentiment there. And the great thing about having the coordinating die is you can just cut the coordinating die out of scrap paper and lay it over the top. You could spray some temporary adhesive on the back if you really wanted to, but I just kind of adjusted them each time I stamped. And then you can automatically stamp something in the background and cover them up. And because they have such a nice, narrow white border around them when you actually do cut them out, it doesn't mask off too much. I mean, you can see it hasn't quite gone up to the image, obviously because the paper was there, but it doesn't look too out of place, really. You know, it still goes really nicely, and it just makes it so much easier for getting the words in the background if you don't want them to go on top of what you're colouring as well. So in some cases, depending what colour you're using and how dark your flowers are, you could do all this kind of overstamping first, and then if you were using watercolour or watercolour pencils or something, you could probably dissolve the ink if you used a distress ink or a distress oxide for doing the stamping in the background. So there are ways around it as well if you didn't want to mask them off, but because you have the coordinating dies there, it is really nice and easy just to do that. And actually, I'll just show you these as well. It cuts around in all of these little areas too, which is really nice. So you're not getting like a landlocked area because these 2 poppies are quite close to each other. They have actually made the die cut around those pieces as well. So just when you're using them as a die cut, they look really lovely. Which is really, really nice. And again, because they're in 2 different pieces, you can actually like tuck them behind each other to create a different kind of an arrangement. And also like bringing this one round to the other side again gives a different kind of look to the arrangement as well. You can even tuck one part behind and one part in front, and really build up a whole border or even a whole like perspective of them to make more of like a field effect of them as well. So you can really play around with all these poppies. So I thought I'd just show you that as well. So that is the coloured, or not coloured pencil, watercolour pencil one. And I've splatted a little bit of, what did I use? Aqua Shimmer, I think, to splat in the background of that. And I have also watercolour penciled the background as well. So all you do is you just go really lightly using the side of the lead, and then you can get this soft look. And the blue splatter in the background is also watercolour pencil, because if you want to like deepen a colour anywhere on your project, whether it's a leaf or part of the flower or something, and you just need a little bit more of that colour, but you don't want to go straight back onto it because the paper's wet, and you know you don't want to get the harsh lines that happen when you put a dry pencil onto the wet paper, you can actually just take a scrap of any card, or watercolour card kind of works the best, and scribble your watercolour pencil onto that card, and then you can take your damp brush and pick up some of the pigment from that. So you're basically using it like a palette, as if, you know, like with an aqua flow you would scribble it onto your glass cutting mat and then pick up some of the colour from there, or with a glitter marker you do the same thing. It's the same technique as that, but you have to obviously scribble onto some kind of rougher sort of surface like cardstock or watercolour paper, and then you can just pick up the colour and use it that way. If you were going for a really subtle colouring of the poppies as well, you could do it that way too. Can you get white poppies? I think you can. So you could do some kind of like really subtle colouring for the poppies in that way as well. And these ones I did actually bring some orange in, so they're kind of more of an orangey red sort of a poppy. I don't know, it kind of looks more, I don't know if it looks more cartoony. I don't know which one looks more cartoony. These ones probably look most realistic, because of the deeper, darker colours maybe. But I really like the stylised look I got with the Copics, and I even added coloured pencils over the top of this one as well. So that's the watercolour pencil one. This was the Aquaflow one. Really, really simple, this one. I was literally just using, I can tell you the colours actually. I was using the Evergreen Fern, which was from one of the earliest sets for the stalks of them. And then for the poppies themselves, I was using the Red Apple, which again is from one of the original releases of the Aquaflows. And then I was using Matador Red and a little bit of French Wine as well, which are two of the colour trends that came out in 2019, I think. And then for the centre of them, I was using the black one, which was one of the original colours, Obsidian Black, that one. And then after it had all dried, I just splattered on a little bit of water to give that speckled kind of look as well. And I also heat embossed this one so that it's got like the little barriers for the edges as well. So that's the Aquaflow one. And for this one, I left the sentiment like this. Oh yeah, this one, I had the thinking of you in the background, but I added keeping you in my heart as like the main sentiment, and then thinking of you as like a sub-sentiment. And then this one I've done combined thinking of you and then at this difficult time, and I've just stapled it on. I thought that would look quite nice, so I just stapled that one on. And then the Copic coloured one, I really love the detail that I got in this, and adding that decoupage kind of element to it, it really makes a difference. So basically on these side flowers, I just cut off the front petals and coloured them and stuck them on the top, so it looks more like it is a cupped flower because you've got that sort of raised little bit for the front of the flower. Then for these two, the raised portion is the majority of the flower bar the most backwards petal, just to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. And then for this flower, I raised up this front part of this petal and also these three other petals because they're kind of more in the foreground. And I just think it just gives such a lovely look, and I really like how that one turned out. And the colouring on this one, I was just using sort of feathering effects with my Copics, and then I came in with a few coloured pencils to try and give more of that like stripy sort of look that some poppies have, just to make it look a little bit different and give it a little bit of a stylised kind of look really. And in the background I did that kind of faux bokeh kind of background, just using 3 different colours of Copics as well, in different blue tones. And I also did a few doodles of coloured pencils on some of them as well, and I think that looks really nice. And then I just did the thinking of you sentiment on the bottom as well. So that is that one, and then this is the other one that is in my sped up video. So this one plus the leafy one, this one, those two are the sped up video that will be up tomorrow as well. And so the final two here are 2 shaker cards that I did. So this one is a larger shaker using the smallest rectangle die as the main kind of aperture opening. Was it the smallest one? No, I think it's the middle sized actually, the middle sized as the main aperture opening on this one. And I've used the large focal point image as well as the little border to have it in the front of it as well. And then this one is just the border and turning it into a shaker. If I had thought about it, I would have moved the foam tape under here further down so that when the card stood up, more of this confetti was hidden underneath the card, but I didn't really think about it and I put the foam tape right up against there. But if you move it down a little bit, then the confetti will have space to sort of disappear so that people only notice that it's a shaker card when you pick it up and shake it. This one I used the ice white circle confetti and some micro beads in there as well, and this is how you can use that beautiful aperture or the cutout die that cuts that border out. So this is cutting it into the front panel, and then I've coloured the image and then matched it up behind it to make my shaker, but for this one I've cut the image out, so you can see how you can get two different effects just by using the same stamp and die together, whether you're recessing the design and turning it into a shaker, but you don't have to, or just like cutting it out as an actual image as well. So I kept this one really simple, and I've just done "I'm so sorry for your loss," and then I've cut all of the dies together. So you basically line up all three of the rectangle dies together, and then I've coloured the outside one with the same reds as I used here, and the inside one as the same greens that I've used. There's not that much green on this image, so I did actually colour over the stems of the poppies as well to give a little bit more colour, and then I've used the green on the frame just to finish that one off. And then this shaker card, I have just used the heart confetti. This is the Scarlet Red Hearts. This was in one of the original sets of 4. I think it was called Cross My Heart confetti. That was in that. And I've coloured these flowers very similar to the other card I just showed you that I decoupaged, but I kept these all flat. But it's similar kind of colouring, but I didn't use the coloured pencils on these ones. And I show you how I've coloured them in my video as well. I'm probably going to speed some of it up really quickly because obviously it took a long time, but I will probably keep like the main flower in a slower kind of speed, obviously still sped up but slower, so that you can actually see how I was colouring it. I'm not that great at colouring, but I like how they turned out, so that's the main thing. And then I've just turned this one into a kind of a love themed card, or like sending love to somebody. So it says "keeping you in my heart," which I thought was really nice, and having the main focal image behind the shaker and then putting the little border one in the foreground. I thought that was really lovely as well. So that is the final card. Wow, I've been talking for ages, but I hope you enjoyed all of these different samples that I've done. I cannot believe I've done 10. Do you know, I actually made 8 cards before I even filmed my sped up video. That's how much I really liked this month's set. I did kind of make 3 cards identical, but I think it's really nice to mix up how you colour things as well, like what medium you're going to use to colour. And you can also use your Nouveau mousses and glacier pastes and Nuvo drops even to colour images in as well, and give a lot of sparkle to your projects too. So I hope you enjoyed this up-close video looking at Tonic Stamp Club number 6, which is the Compassion and Poppies set. The links for the stamp and die set will be below the video. Hopefully it won't sell out as quickly as the last 2 months have, but it'll be there if you are interested in getting it. And I'll also try and link as many of the other different products I've used as well, like embossing powders and ink pads and stuff. Sometimes I can't fit it all below the video, so there's also the proper complete full list will be on my blog post as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!